Greetings all. We'll start in a few minutes. I see Rita's hand up. I'm not sure if she needed anything. Um,
I just had a question for Will. Will, do you have the ability to edit something? Remember the panel that we did with Sarah Solomon? She's been in touch with me and she said I can have that panel. And I know that it needs to be edited if we do take it, because it was a wonderful panel about the resurrection of somebody who had been incarcerated, and also what some business people are doing to help previously incarcerated people stay employed. So I don't know if you have the ability to edit, do you?
Not particularly well. I'm not a video editor, but if it is sent to me, I can make it work, as Tim Gunn would say.
Okay, so. Thank you.
Whenever you guys are ready to get started, but no rush.
Okay, well, we can get it going. I didn't know what Rita wanted. I didn't know if it was something pertaining to this meeting or not. So, yeah. So everyone, welcome to the Social Justice Committee meeting today. There is no guest speaker. We will be just having a dialogue about domestic violence, which is such a much needed conversation that should be had over and over again, from public schools to churches to any type of place. In 1 month alone that's dedicated, I believe is in October, it's just not enough to have these type of discussions. So it's basically going to be an open dialogue, but I want Will to give his normal speech and then I'll kick it off again. And Sarah's here, co-chair extraordinaire. And welcome everyone.
All right, well, welcome everyone. If it's your first time joining us at CB8 for one of our virtual committee meetings, you'll notice you're muted and you're going to stay muted except for whenever you're called on. The way you can participate is by going to the reactions icon and pressing the raise hand button. So whenever you're ready to make a comment or add a question, just go down to that reactions icon, look for the button that says raise hand, and you press it, and only press it once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're calling in from the phone, it's *9 to raise your hand, or *6 then to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once one of the two co-chairs calls on you. If you're having problems, the chat is available for technical support only to help with the Zoom software. It is not to ask questions of the co-chairs or to make comments. They will never see those chats. And finally, if you're using an older version of Zoom, we ask you go to the participant section where you'll find the raise hand feature there. With that, I'll hand it back over to Sarah and Sandrea, and they can get the meeting started in full.
Okay. So thanks again, everyone, for joining. And I just kick it off like this. Love isn't supposed to hurt. As a domestic violence survivor myself, I am reminded of the outcomes of victims. Some survive, but their lives aren't the same. Some are in prison because they fought back, and some are even murdered. Domestic violence is a crime that is not exclusive to one particular gender or sexual orientation. The age of the victims, not victimizer, can range from young, middle age, and even seniors. Domestic abuse, also known as domestic violence or intimate partner violence, it's called different things. It's when a pattern of behavior in any relationship that is used to gain or maintain power and control over an intimate partner. So like I said, it was just so needed to have a discussion tonight for people to express things that they may have see. I mean, it's an ongoing issue around the globe, domestic violence. As I said, personally, I'm a survivor. I have stitches in and out, inside and out my forehead. And I was young. I was about 17. That was the first time, so inside and out. And I never forget when I went to the hospital to seek care. I remember saying, my boyfriend, they said, what happened? And I said, my boyfriend did this to me. And the look on the nurse's face to the doctor, and I was young then, I didn't understand, I didn't get it. But I have that to remind me, you know, my situation. And then it was another relationship in the past too, a husband. When I got married later on, I was living with my ex-husband at that time. We were married with an order of protection in place. You know, they didn't separate. This was in the 90s, so they didn't separate. They didn't separate us. He got arrested and he came back home with an order of protection. So I don't know I don't know what happens now, because that was the 90s. I'm sure, I would hope that the laws and things have changed. But can you imagine living, your abuser coming back home and you have to live together in the same household? So that's some of my personal story. And as many know, we just in CB8, we had a young lady murdered, 20 years old, Asia Johnson, shot point blank range in the head. It was a domestic violence case, and that's very disheartening. And there was a big vigil for her, for the family, and then Julie Bennett hosted that, and Congresswoman Calla Maloney did a town hall on gun violence. So these type of incidents that can be that tragic and end in death, it does provoke and push people to act, from legislators and so forth, but then it diminishes, right? It happens and then it's gone. And I believe if we can continue to have conversations openly throughout, like I said, churches, schools, and so forth, about domestic violence, and you know, teach people and teach adults and teach people about conflict resolution, because no one's supposed to put their hands on anyone. And also, domestic violence is just not always physical. It's verbal abuse also, which, you know, the physical abuse is one trauma, but the verbal trauma is a whole different type of trauma. And you would have to live through that to understand it, you know what I mean? And that's very uncomfortable, you know, because you live and you walk on eggshells. So I'm speaking of personal experience. So I've been through the physical and the verbal, and in the relationships, they were physical and verbal. So I went through both dynamics myself. And Sarah, if you want to chime in, and I'm gonna send over some material to Will to just send some links to you all that'll give some statistics that you all could review on your own. Like I said, this is not about a expert coming before us, speaking to us, which is always good too. But this is just a dialogue for us to talk, discuss, share feelings, and a much needed topic. Sarah, you wanna chime in, and then we can go to any raised hands and do some dialoguing and questions or so forth.
Yeah, thank you, Sandria. I don't have anything to add, but to kind of amplify what you said about domestic violence being an issue of control. So it's not limited by gender, it's not limited by sexual identity, or and it can be mental and physical. And so as we have our conversation today, that to have that at the forefront, that it comes in many forms, and that it can happen in any sort of relationship, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a romantic relationship. And so just for us to have kind of that just an open mind to where our conversation may lead us. And so thank you, Sandria, for selecting this topic this month, and I throw it back to you.
Okay. We can call on, I think, thank you, Sarah. Erica had a hand up first, I believe.
Thanks, Sandria, and thanks for sharing. I want to share a couple of things, but first I wanted to ask, can we just open this up since this is such a small group, can we just unmute everybody and open up the chat? Is that possible?
So the chat, no, never, we don't ever do that. It is up to the co-chairs if they want everybody to be able to unmute themselves.
I mean,
It's not how we like to run
Yeah,
our meetings.
yeah, I mean, because some people overtalk each other, so I think we could stay with the raise hand function. That'll be fine, and we'll call on people more than once. That's not a problem. It's
Yeah,
just
and
that-
if there's stuff that folks want to share via the chat, they can send it to me. I can put it in the chat to everybody.
Yeah, I just shared 2 things with you to drop into the main chat. So my friend Tracy was supposed to speak this evening, but she had something come up. And I dropped her story into the chat so people are aware of it. Overwhelmingly, well, let me go back. 80% of women in prison right now are there because of domestic violence in their background. Overwhelmingly, men kill women to keep them from leaving, and women kill men to leave. So keep those numbers in mind. The women, the 80% of women often have children, multiple children. They may go into prison pregnant and their child is taken away from them. Women, domestic violence doesn't know socioeconomic background. It doesn't discriminate. In my early 20s, I was living with someone that I broke up with, and he didn't take it well. He stalked me not only where I lived and worked, but over state lines, because I had to move to get away from him because there was a notion that he was going to get violent. And again, this was in the early 90s. And at that time, police didn't care about it one way or another. They also didn't have the laws at that point. I had a friend who her partner started it, and they arrested both of them in their home because they couldn't determine who started it. This was the early 90s. Now, Sandrea, to your point, we would like to think that things have changed now because there are landmark cases that have occurred since that time where there's case law on it now. However, it still revolves around finding police or law enforcement that are willing to go the distance, because a lot of domestic violence, whether it's physical, verbal, is, as they say, he said, she said, especially if people don't present to an emergency room or a doctor with physical marks on them. It's way more prevalent than people think it is. I volunteer with Court Watch New York City, and a good deal of what comes through there has to do with domestic violence. And in this day and age, people are losing their homes as a result of it, one way or another. So it's rendering people homeless. It's rendering people losing their jobs, losing their livelihood, losing their children, in some cases in what may be a misunderstanding rather than domestic violence. So the fact that they've now set up 988 gives me a little bit of hope, because not every discrepancy in a home is necessarily a case of domestic violence in the sense of someone needing to be taken to jail. It could be a disagreement. It could be something that happened between a parent and a child, where the child is then taken from the home instead of mental health addressed. It's such a complex issue, and law enforcement, as always, tries to criminalize it. My friend Tracy has been caught up in this since March of 2020. the, you know, we had high hopes from Alvin Bragg because during his campaign, he more than once posted on social media that what Tracy was facing was an injustice and that the charges should be dropped against her for defending herself. And so far, he hasn't been willing to do that. So she is a nurse that cannot work in her field right now at a time in the last 2.5 years when we all know that nurses were desperately needed on the front line. And anytime she tries to apply to a job right now, mind you, not even having gone through a trial and been convicted of anything, this comes up on her background check. So it's more prevalent. It's more prevalent than you know. And there are probably people in your life that you have no idea have been through something like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yes, Miss Tracy's story is basically the flip side of it in a sense. Trying to defend or however it was, I don't want to speak to it fully, but we have women in prison from the fact for fighting back, as well as, you know, men. It's not gender exclusive, but she's an example of a history of domestic violence, and her spouse, I think they were estranged or something like that, is no longer here because, you know, and the behavior, and it's unfortunate, you know, and it's unfortunate that she's dealing with this, still fighting for her freedom. So, and that's one of the flip sides of it as well. As I said, is some people wind up in prison. It's not just the victimizer, it can be the victim. And that's very unfortunate. Thanks again for sharing. Rita?
Hi, can you hear me? First of all, Sandrea, you have been an example of so many wonderful things. And without knowing this, I'm now adding this to the list. Thank you. I just want to, I don't know whether everybody is aware, but WIN, W-I-N, standing for Women in Need, somebody donated property on East 91st Street between 1st and 2nd Avenue and built a beautiful, beautiful home. I went to the opening, and what it is that it is women with children, and they are all victims of violence. So in order to protect them, and if you weren't lucky enough to know Dave Rosenstein, he was vociferous about having somebody at the desk in the lobby so that nobody could get in, because he had experienced in his work down at with addiction, is that if a man comes and visits his wife and children and refuses to leave, you can't make him leave. And there he is. This is what you were running away from. On the other hand, I'm very disappointed in WIN to begin with, because I had Delizia Pizza, who wanted to have a welcome party for the children to the neighborhood. I have my daughter-in-law, who is a home stager, who is willing to come in. The apartments were absolutely magnificent, to show them how to help them stage their home. I also noticed that there wasn't uniform Venetian blinds, and people were hanging up sheets, and that makes the place look not neat. So we haven't been able to get through to that. So sometimes it's the agency that is not helping as much. Whatever is needed, we are willing to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rita, for sharing. Ms. Stephanie?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to say that domestic violence happens regardless of socioeconomic levels. We live in a very high-end building, and about 12 years ago, the husband of one of our tenants severely beat her, and the police were called. He was taken out of the house to jail. The children were sent to their grandparents, and the mother then had a security guard downstairs to prevent that the husband could not come back into the apartment. And it went on like this for a couple of years, and somehow he got turned around. He's no longer an alcoholic. The children are back, and they were able to get the necessary help that they needed. And the youngest child is now going to Yale. The older child is, I don't know, a sophomore at the University of Chicago. And somehow they've pulled it together, but they had a lot of help. So it doesn't matter what socioeconomic level you are. It happens to lots of different people. And you were right that we would never have known had the police not come to take him out of the apartment. We wouldn't have known how he abused her in a drunken rage. That's all I have to say. It's an issue, and the social services are very necessary for all types of people. And thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much. My eyes are bad. Hevita? I don't know if I'm saying it right. Sorry if I didn't. Please tell me that I say it right, wrong.
My name is Kavita. Thank you. I'm brand new to this committee and to CB8, so this is my first meeting. I had two things quickly. I just had a quick question for Miss Rita. Do you mind repeating the name of that house, for the women and children who have been victims of violence, and the location? And if you happen to know, are there opportunities to get involved as a volunteer?
The location is a shelter that is run by the Women in Need organization, WIN.
Okay.
And you can find them online. They're run by the former city council speaker, Chris Quinn.
Oh, awesome. Okay, thank you. And the second thing I wanted to share, I run a health education nonprofit called Girls Health Ed. Essentially, our mission is to advance gender equality by fostering healthy, informed, and empowered decision-making in adolescent girls and young women. And so to this end, we go into schools and community centers in the various areas that we serve, and we deliver workshops about a whole range of health topics, including healthy relationships, violence prevention, and consent. And so I just wanted to put that out there in case anybody had any resources for maybe helping me get into some of the schools and community centers in our neighborhood and in the city. I just wanted to put that out there, and I'd be happy to share my information in case that's of interest.
Yeah, please drop it in the chat and we can pull it out. Thank you. See, look what's happening. a dialogue, right? Dialogue of people coming together, sharing. Who's up next? Rita. Oh no, Erica had her hand first. Erica.
Sarah, you might remember this, or Sandria, the organization that acquired Center Against Domestic Violence, the National Resource Institute. I can't, like, I'm drawing a blank right now on who absorbed them, but my mother was on the board of the center for 10 years. And they were the first shelter program in the early 70s here in the city. I mean, they had extreme longevity. And once the executive director retired, I'm trying to find the name of the organization that took them over. But in that vein, they created also the first, group in the school systems, the New York City school system in 98 for teen dating violence prevention. And that group is still around. It's called RAP, Relationship Abuse Prevention Program. So that's been happening in the city since 1998. And I was involved with that group just by default. I want to say it's the National Resource Institute, but they're also here in Manhattan. But unfortunately, they dissolved the center's branding and messaging and that kind of stuff, because they were just really well known. I think since, I want to say 70, since the mid 70s in the city. But RAP is still, they kept RAP. So they're already in the school systems, Pavita, if that helps you. Yeah. I can drop that into, it's just driving me crazy because I went to the big retirement gala and then was involved for a little while in the organization. This group still runs a large portion of the domestic violence shelters in the city. I've also done some stuff with WIN, but Center Against Domestic Violence was really the precursor to all of the organizations that we know now for domestic violence and the support for women and children in the city. And I will find that information.
Thank you. Rita?
I have a question, but to answer that young lady's, there is no name of a house. It's an address and it's on East 91st Street between 1st and 2nd Avenue on the south side of the street. Supposedly there is an on-site social worker. That was part of the deal. I have no idea if they are there. I've not been able to get in touch with anybody at WIN. So that is aside. It's frustrating, but that's it. I have a question. Is domestic violence in New York City, is it more of people who were born here or people who have emigrated here, and in their socioeconomic is that men are much more, can do whatever they want. So does anybody know if the domestic violence is more from people who were born in this country, or if we have even incorporated others?
I can't actually personally, maybe somebody else can if they can pull up statistics, but that's a very broad range to try to figure out. You would really need the data. You would really need to know
Just
who was born here, who wasn't. But it is very large here. But one of the things is we have to keep in mind, just like with rape, domestic violence is always not reported. So if someone's suffering in silence, it will never make the statistics. Right. So that's one of the problems. So we can never get an accurate count ever, because some people suffer in silence. Some people leave, they run away, they get away. And then they just, put it to the back of their minds, right? And, because with my first incident, that wasn't reported to the police. So
And,
but, that would be some research, but go ahead. Sarah.
Rita, to answer your question, the UN reports that 1 in 3 women experience domestic violence globally. And so they don't have statistics, at least in this resource that I'm looking at, they don't report beyond the experience of women. But I would say that one of the I think it's the National Center for Victims, NCVC, at the DOJ records crime statistics on domestic violence, and that they do interviews and surveys, and it's understood, as Sandra was saying, that there's serious underreporting because of how difficult it is for people to share this information, and beyond reporting it to law enforcement, that even talking about it, or even sharing it with a researcher that says they're going to keep this information anonymized, that there's a understanding that it's highly underreported. And if the UN rates are 1 in 3 women globally, then this is something that is ubiquitous.
thank you.
Yeah. And it's nothing on the men, right? Nothing. It was nothing on the male, right?
I don't see it here, no.
Will dropped into the chat for me if you scroll back up. I dropped in the link to Sanctuary for Families, and they have on their domestic violence page, they have stats there, Rita, but not you might be able to find on the New York, one of the New York City government sites, the demographic breakdown, but I haven't necessarily looked for that information, only because, I have direct experience in it, and I know it's a lot higher than people think it is. The other thing is, Pavita, you're not going to find addresses for domestic violence shelters on purpose. So you won't see that on WIN's website either, obviously for security reasons. So anything that you would do for them or with them will go directly through their headquarters. But I know that they do have programs in schools at this point, for sure.
Yeah. Even the point of when we speak of things not being reported with domestic violence, rape and domestic violence occurs. And if it's not reported, the rape nor the violence, that's not reported. And, it's just, it's an individual's choice to come forward, and depending on their comfortability, and sometimes they're scared, and it's really they really suffer in silence. I had a lady when I was growing up. I'm going to get to you, Miss Wendy. I had a lady, I was growing up, and she lived when I lived in the Bronx, and she told me, I was still at my mother, so I had to be 17, 18 maybe. And she said, when I bang on the wall, call the police. So, and that's what I had to do for her. But then when I look back now, the guy could have known that it was somebody in my apartment calling because she was banging for help, but that was her code with a neighbor because our bedrooms were connected. And, and eventually they did part ways, but this is just the horrors of it, how people have to deal, and provisions they have to make. So I just wanted to share that. Miss Wendy?
I wanted to have a couple of different things to say. Pavita, is your target population teenage girls? So I have a couple of ideas. One is that if you wanted to look at private schools, since it happens across demographics, there's the independent schools. There's an association of independent schools, and they can possibly lead you into contacts with various headmasters and headmistresses, an antiquated set of terms, but the heads of schools. The Archdiocese is another way to get into the parochial schools for these programs. And I would encourage you, if it's at all possible to do, and it may not be within your mandate, to also reach out your educational mandate to young men, both because they are also victims and also because everybody is entitled to have an education as to how people can deal with each other in a kinder way. I remember it was Gloria Steinem said, if you want to have a more just society, raise your sons as feminists. And I never forgot that. I was quite young when she said that. The other thing is that there are so many stages to domestic abuse, and you mentioned both mental and physical, but there are so many stages. I sent an email to chairpersons Sandrea and Sarah earlier today. I didn't want to step on a guest speaker's toes, so I'm kind of, I hope that the guest speaker will come at some future date, but I'm also glad.
Excuse me, we didn't have anybody slated to be.
Okay. Then I feel,
yeah.
Good.
Then
I feel
dialogue.
so. I'm not stepping on anybody's toes by saying that there are stages, and some of it involves early grooming, or what we accept just to be nice, or what we just overlook because it just seemed odd, but you overlook it, and then you overlook the next one, and then you feel in too deep, and then there's sometimes a sense of shame. And at each one of those stages, there might be an intervention. And I'd love to be able to brainstorm what that would be and how we would reach out so that more affected individuals would be able to come to a place of peace and security and justice.
That's true. Thank you. And if you want to share your information, I don't know if you can drop it in the chat to Will, Sarah. If not, Sarah can, you could drop it in Sarah from Wendy's email, or Wendy, you could drop it into chat if you the link, because I know I did you. You could drop it. So
I'll do a little searching. Oh, thank you. Okay.
I'm
going to do a little searching while y'all talk.
Yeah, this is what it's about. There's also something called battered women syndrome. That's another under domestic violence. That's a form of when the victim continues to go back, or they really can't leave. And, so it's so much, there's a lot of resources. There's a lot of entities out there that are helping people, the shelters and so forth. But it, like I said, is an individual choice. Families can talk to them, but the individual really has to make that decision. I could say for me, it wasn't easy. It's hard to leave. And mine wasn't, some people have a financial burden, right? That's why some people stay into these relationships. That wasn't the case. We both were city workers, so that wasn't the case with my spouse, but it just was I did make the call, I did get him arrested, but he came back home with an order of protection. So, and we made amends eventually, and abuse did eventually stop. But I went to work. I worked out at the 19th precinct. I was working late nights. I went to work with bruises on my body. That's how bad it was. So, but like I said, I just hope and pray the laws are different now. That if somebody's experiencing that and they're married, that they will separate, the family, at least for a time period, rather counseling or whatever needs to take place. Wendy hand is still up, but I think Erica was next. I don't know if Wendy didn't take her hand down or, okay. Erica?
It's the Urban Resource Institute. It was driving me absolutely crazy.
You got it. Ding, 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 ding.
They acquired the Center Against Domestic Violence. They did away with the branding and they integrated their branding and messaging. However, they kept the RAP program, and I dropped the website, the link, and Will dropped it in to the group. And you can see when you go under services, they have RAP listed there, and that's for both all gender identifying people. And the stuff that I saw them doing while the center was still around was amazing. And this is a few years ago at this point. So I can only imagine with greater resources behind them, they've probably been able to take it even further. So you can, Pavita, you can see from the site what they're currently doing and see maybe if there's overlap, or maybe that'll give you more ideas for where they're not currently working with, because it's so important to do this early, because especially, I had some friends in high school that went through some stuff, but it's nothing compared to now with social media and being able to make fake accounts and all that kind of stuff. It's nothing that, at least as a Gen Xer, when you left school, you could get away from the bullying, like now it's just some of the stuff I'm seeing, it's just relentless and it's horrifying. So yes, it's the Urban Resource Institute, but don't ask me what I had for lunch yesterday. I won't be able to tell you. But it's a huge issue. It's a huge issue. And, I say this every meeting, court arraignments are open to the public. The public has a right to be there. And it goes, the Manhattan, I think this is true of all of them because it's state level. Mm-hmm. Arraignments happen definitely in Manhattan from, I believe it's from 9 a.m. to 1 a.m. because arraignments technically are supposed to happen within 24 hours of an arrest. And overwhelmingly, there are domestic violence cases coming in through either the person still being under arrest or through a desk appearance ticket, which releases them, but then they have to come back for a court hearing to see, if anything has happened since they got arrested. And if it doesn't, their charges might be dropped. But anybody can go in and sit in arraignments to see what your tax dollars are being spent on or wasted, as the case may be, from a lot of what I've seen. And that's attached to people's lives. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else? Before I speak some more. So when we think about domestic violence, right, to this group that's here, a husband and a wife have an argument and it turns into a fight. that wouldn't really, would you phrase that as domestic violence? Or that's just a marital spat? But if it's ongoing and it's constant and somebody's constantly getting abused, beaten, let's put it on the woman this time, right? Because we always hear women or the abusers. So say the woman is the aggressor, and if she's constantly beating up her husband, that's domestic violence if it's on a consistent basis. So that's one of the issues when the police come out to spats, you know, and if it's a history, then they would know from the 911 calls, if there's been a history or something like that, or somebody may say from the household, it's a history of, there's a history of domestic violence here or something like that. Or they may be known to the department, right? That's a possibility too. But, it's one incident is just too many, right? But there are times that things happen. So we're not saying give that a pass, but that's something to look at. And then if it happens again, then that's when that abuse begins to form. So if you don't stop it, am I making any sense? Because, they could come out to a marital spat and that was just that. And they wind up sometimes taking both of them, right? And that's not really, it would fall under domestic violence, but that doesn't mean it's a pattern. That could have just been a husband and a wife or a relationship, two intimate partners. Let me be a little open here. Two intimate partners having an issue, and they take them down and it gets resolved through the courts. But it does sit under that umbrella of domestic, but that doesn't mean it's the pattern. So the patterns are the ones, sadly, that we need to take note of as good neighbors, as human beings. You might see a friend with a black eye or something a little more than once. There's indicators, and see how we can help somebody. And sometimes you might have to be a support system to someone, meaning taking that call 3 a.m, 4 a.m, 1 a.m. But people get tired too. So that's another thing. But so I just wanted to mix it up and throw that out there. Erica?
Well, you also get a lot of, well, why didn't you leave? There's a lot of victim blaming. It's certainly harder when you don't have the financial ability to do that, and especially if you have children. But I've also seen people who have the financial ability to leave. It's more than just what you have in your bank account that potentially keeps you from staying. I remember there was years ago at a company I worked at, there was a senior colleague, very senior, the top, like on the leadership team. And when we would get together for company events and you'd bring, a partner with you, something always just struck me as being off about her husband and how she acted around him versus how she acted when she wasn't with him. And, we later came to find out that they had, she had those issues at home. And I just remember thinking, because I think I was in my late 20s, even having been through it, I just remember thinking she has the financial means. Why is she so successful in her professional life and she's not willing to walk away from this? And it's because they chip away at your self-esteem and make you think that you can't survive without them, regardless of having the financial means to do so. So you can be abused and you may not see bruises from that abuse. So you can't, you never truly know what's going on in someone's home, right? I mean, I went to between 25 and 32, I went to about 30 weddings and was in 8. And I can count on one hand now, fast forward 20 years later, how many of those people are still together. And statistically, 2 of them were as a result of this. And I never in a million years would have thought that that would have been the case for either of those 2 couples. So you just never know what's going on behind closed doors. The other thing is, to this day, the police will still say that the scariest call, the most unpredictable call they get are related to domestic violence, because they have no idea what's going to be happening when they get there. The last time I checked in New York State, the penalty for domestic violence still was not execution. So when I hear police say that, it's just another reason why the police should not be the first line of defense in situations like that. If somebody calls 911 and says, my partner has a gun held to me and I'm in a closet, that's one thing. But most of the time, it's things like what Sandria has been talking about throughout our discussion, where, you know, arguments escalate, someone's drinking too much, but sometimes they still result in the extreme with law enforcement. So I will be eagerly watching 988 statistics very closely.
Thank you. Thank you. I would say too, from my experience and from others, I've been in a group before with women, love, you're in love, and it's hard to walk away. I didn't have an issue. I've heard about the self-esteem issue for some women. It wasn't mine. I wasn't broken down in that manner, but you know, so I did fight back sometimes too. So, but you know, when you think about it, the scariest thing is, you don't want to be in Bedford Hills, you know, doing time, for fighting back. But then you want to survive also. So that's one of the issues. I also had suffered with panic attacks for a while. So that was one of my issues. And I got into a group with that. So I'm giving full disclosure because we have to, us that have survived it, we have to tell our stories. And, you know, it's nothing to be ashamed of. And I went through, you know, some panic anxiety attacks. When I was working out the 19th, the ambulance had to come get me. I was having these they were random. So, and that was because the abuse was at times random. It was nothing I didn't know it was going to happen. And, but it wasn't I didn't go through like a self-esteem issue. My husband just was, my husband was jealous for no reason. And, you know, he would drink and stuff, and that's when it would happen. So a lot of times I would just pack a bag and take a cab to my mother's house, you know, and my mother was old school, not realizing or knowing, well, rest her soul, that, you know, knowing I was going through something, but old school type people, you know, go back to your husband, you know, but I had a safe haven, you know, at that time. So, but everybody doesn't have that, you know, yeah. Oh, okay. I'm not gonna mess up your name. Pavita, I don't know. I'm not gonna mess it up. But it's so
No,
cool.
that's right. Pavita. Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
Yeah, no, thank you, Sandria and Erica, for your insights. I think related to that, another factor in, you know, why don't you just leave? I think a lot of women, but also just generally people who are in these types of situations think like, oh, I can change him, or, oh, I can help him, or, you know, I don't want to give up on something that could be special. You know, I've personally been in situations like this as well. yeah, a lot of times it is possible to, I mean, I'm not saying it's a fix all, like it really takes a lot of hard work and, you know, sometimes therapy and a lot of self-reflection. It is possible that people can change, but I think a lot of people tend to fall into this cycle thinking that that it's their job to, you know, fix what the other person is doing to them, and that if they just stay, or if they give them another chance, then things will get better, not recognizing that maybe some of these behaviors could be red flags, and that it's not your job to change anybody. You can be there to support and to provide empathy, but you can't fix somebody. Somebody has to be willing to fix themselves and recognize that what they're doing is an issue, and that just takes constant communication. And yeah.
So true. Yeah, it's really good. You nailed it. You literally nailed it. It's facts. You know, there's a stage, they call it the honeymoon stage, you know. It happens, and the sorries, the apologies, I won't never do it again. And that's what a lot of women go through. And then that's when the woman or man, I won't be gender exclusive, not, you know, saying what, but you know, it won't happen again. And the victim softens up and they wind up being okay for a while, and then it happens again. And again. So, but you know, one time, two times is too many. And just to know, as I opened up, you know, as love doesn't hurt, right? That, you know, victims will never be the same. That they survive. Some are in prison, and some even die. So rolling the dice with your life is scary. You know, it's really scary. So victims as a whole needs support, and also the victimizers. Like, where does that come from? Why would someone want to put their hands on someone? Where does that come from? Is that from their upbringing? You know, so sometimes you have to look at the person, why the person stays there. They always look at the victim. Why does the victim stays there? But why is the abuser? Why is he abuser? Why is she abuser? What was their lifestyle? What was their upbringing? So, and sometimes those things are never told till later on, you know. So, Sarah, you wanted to? I see your green thing. No? Oh, okay. I seen the green. I didn't know if it was you trying to say something. The light, the green was on there. Yeah. All right, everyone. Anything else? Anybody else want to share this on this open dialogue before we move on? There's links in the chat. I suggest you can grab some of those statistics and details, links, some really good links with some details. And I did a little research and got some things together. So, but I didn't speak from that. I spoke from personal experience. So, yeah. Last round for hands. Anybody? Boaz has been quiet. You've been quiet tonight. You always say something. You have anything to say? Okay. All right. Last call for any hands. Sarah, anything you want to say?
No, just to say thank you so much, Sandria, for being vulnerable, for sharing on this very sensitive and difficult topic. And I'm really glad that you asked us to have this conversation in light of the recent murder of a young mother on the Upper East Side, and remind us that that this conversation isn't exclusive to these kinds of events, and that this is something that is an issue every day, all the time. And so I'm just so grateful to you for raising this topic and for taking the lead in such a in such an important way.
So, thank you all for participating. I believe we had a very robust conversation. Um, a lot of feedback, some information, just some listening, but through it all, I think we did a great job learning and listening and resources, right? We got some resources together. Young lady, she's doing some amazing work. So I'm gonna look to you soon and maybe do some work with you. Who knows? But that's good because it needs to start there. It needs to start early. The awareness needs to start early. So with that said, oh, were these hands up? Okay. I don't know who had their hand first. I thought they were just, okay. I'll go to
Yeah.
Miss. Okay, then you're open. Okay, go ahead. You got it.
Okay, yes. Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh,
No, I love what you were saying just now about early intervention, and that's actually the point that I was going to make. So in my graduate studies, my research was about intimate partner violence, specifically within the cyberbullying context. And one of the greatest findings that I found was that childhood trauma is a major risk factor for later involvement in IPV, whether that be as a victim or as the victimizer. And so that really just speaks to the importance of intervening early and breaking the cycle and giving kids early on the tools to cope with the traumas that they're experiencing and whatever challenges that life throws our way. And so that's really what keeps that, combined with my own personal experiences, keeps me doing the work that I'm doing. And I'm really happy to meet all of you and really happy to be collaborating with such an incredible group of people. So just wanted to say thank you for that.
okay. Thank you. And thank you for joining. And I don't know if you put your contact information. I want to connect with you. Okay. So maybe you could put it in for Will to send to me.
Yeah, thank you.
And we could connect. Okay. Miss Stephanie. Can't hear you. Check your volume. We can't hear you. You're unmuted though.
No. Do you have headphones plugged in or maybe Bluetooth?
So log back on maybe. Give her a minute maybe. Give her 2 minutes and see if she's gonna log back on. But we'll give her see if she logs back on. We'll give her like 2 minutes and then if not, we'll bring it down. I was gonna ask her to chat, maybe chat Will, but she fell off or went off. Okay, oh, Miss Wendy, so give us some time. Miss Wendy?
I just to fill out the time before Stephanie comes back, hoping that she's able to reconnect. I did want to talk about the early grooming stage because not in a domestic violence sense. I remember when I was a Psych 1 student and was eager to get a good grade and a good recommendation in a hall worth of 330 students. A professor asked us to come, 3 volunteers to come to the front of the class. And she shot questions at the 3 of us, another woman and a guy and myself. And they were all very simple math problems, 2 + 5, 3 - 4. And after about a minute, only the male was answering. And she stopped the experiment and she said to the class, what is happening here? And many of them said, oh, it's obvious men are better at math than women. And she said, no, I only reinforced his answers and I completely ignored the women, and it shaped behavior within less than 3 minutes. And something like that, which really has no emotional value. I mean, I think none of us particularly attached any tremendous value to math, maybe a little to getting a good grade in Psych 1. But it wasn't the same as being with a domestic partner. Behavior is shaped quickly. And I think having that awareness is helpful as well. And I wanted to say that in terms of statistics, it is vastly more women than men that experience this, but for men who experience domestic violence, there's such a sense of shame usually that they too really underreport it as well. And it's a very difficult situation, including how we socialize children even from infancy has been shown to shape behavior as well. So if we are very cognizant of this, perhaps we can forge a better future. I don't think we're ever going to get rid of this problem, but forge a better future. And then the question is, if we see this, if we see it in the street, if we hear a neighbor, what are some of the things that we should be doing ourselves? So I'm closing that out. Stephanie, you're back. I'm so happy to see you, and I will mute myself.
Thank you. Stephanie, you're up.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. Thank you for being so patient. I don't know why. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I just this has been very sobering for me. And I just wanted to say that sometimes marriages work out. And I don't want any of you who don't have partners of any sort to be discouraged because maybe it's luck, maybe it's who you pick, but John and I have been married 56 years. And yes, we have fights. I mean, ask our children, but somehow they've always been resolved. So I don't know who doesn't have a partner, but pick well and you'll have a wonderful experience. So that's what I have to say.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank
you.
you, everybody.
Thank you for sharing that and giving us some positivity on the end note. I see Wendy's hand left, right? She's gone. Okay. All right. Okay. Now's a thumbs up. Okay. Sarah, anything else before we go into what is it next? Old business? What is it? I forgot the order now. Yeah, old business. So do we have any old business? Any new business? Okay. Well, thank you all for joining and this robust dialogue. And can we have a motion to close? Yeah. So, oops, Rita, Erica, Wendy, thumbs up, Sarah. Okay. Thank you all. Good night. Thank you. Thanks, Billy, for joining.